Hey everybody, back again, Mr. Duger, super simplified social studies for you, and today, quickly gonna go over the American colonies. So in your history classes, when we talk about the colonies, there's 13 original colonies. We don't always go over all of them. Instead, we kind of pick and choose the more important ones or the ones that stand out or the ones that kind of represent some of the other ones. Because some of them are pretty similar, but some of them are more important than others, historically at least. So today, going over some of the early colonies and trying to see how they helped to form as collectively what we call the United States, right? So when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, he discovered the New World, and very quickly other Europeans will follow suit and come over to explore this new continent. And so a lot of Europeans, well, Spain will be going into South America, but a lot of the rest of Europe, especially England, they want colonies too. They want in on this. And so they'll be going to North America and colonizing and exploring that, right? Now, these people are coming for many different reasons. This is a dangerous journey. This is a long trip. You just don't do it because you're bored packing up and moving. This is probably for most people a one-way trip. You're never gonna go back home to your family or your friends or the town you were born in. You are marooning yourself in a distant land that is unsettled, unfamiliar, brand new. It is a difficult trip, but many people still take it because it's worth it. Many people are coming in search of wealth, land, natural resources, which this new world had plenty of. Many people are coming to explore, start over with a brand new life, coming for religious freedom, or even just because it seemed like some, adventure. If you're a young guy and got nothing to do, this might give you some exciting stories to tell, right? Everyone's coming for different reasons, and because of that, these colonies all kind of grow up, or they're settled in different ways. They're all very unique from one another, but they're all collectively these mostly English colonies. So they have some things in common, but they also have a lot that makes them different. Now, the first successful colony that we study is Jamestown. There was a previous one, the colony of Roanoke, which was not successful. Mysteriously, everybody there disappeared, and it's one of the great historical unknowns. We still really don't know what happened to those colonists, but Jamestown was the colony that stuck. So it was founded in 1607 with a charter from the King of England given to the London Company. This was a business. It's a business colony, right? So these people weren't really coming to do anything else except to make money. For them, it was a job. It was work. You could make money growing crops in the New World that may not grow well back in Europe. Huge demand for things like tobacco, which we'll come back to. And so these colonists were employees. They were paid to sail over and help establish a new colony and given land from the king. That's what a charter is, right? This was all the King of England's land. He had claimed it all, but basically a charter gave the London Company permission to work on and profit off the king's land. So that's what a charter is, kind of like royal permission, right? Now, when they got here, I guess, were sick and tired of sailing for so long. They just pretty much plopped down and set up shop at the first place they landed, which was basically in the middle of a swamp in Virginia. They probably should have scouted around and picked a better place because they were in probably like the worst place possible for a new colony. It's in the middle of a salty, swampy marsh, so crops have a hard time growing in that water. Lots of mosquitoes, lots of disease. It was not a great place to build a colony, but as you can see from the map there, Jamestown really was just James Fort. That's kind of all it was. It was a triangular fort, a couple little small houses and huts inside, and that was the first colony and kind of what it looked like. Now, these colonists we know from looking at records, were obsessed. They were tobacco crazy because these guys all came to try and get rich. And so one reason the colony almost failed is these original colonists were too busy planting tobacco everywhere they could instead of trying to, plant food and things they could eat. We know from, again, historical recollections and letters and stuff like that, these guys were just planting tobacco anywhere they could. This weed was all over the place, planting it in fields, planting it in their yards, in home, in their kitchens. Like you might have some flowers for decoration. Any pot, any vessel they had, they were planting tobacco. Can't really eat tobacco though, and so many of them died because of starvation. They would rather plant tobacco crops for money instead of planting food to eat. And it looked like the colony may fail until some people came in and kind of cleaned Jamestown up. That's a different story. Eventually they stabilize, they find a balance, and it becomes a sustainable, profitable colony because there was big demand for tobacco back in Europe. The other important thing is that in Virginia, as they grow, they will create what's called the House of Burgesses. Now, you'll hear about this a lot in your government class, but early on, these colonists realize they're kind of on their own. The king is far away. All the lords are, they are on their own to govern and lead themselves. And so the leadership in Virginia was a representative self-government. So they elected colonists, just regular, normal people, to go to the House of Burgesses, which is basically like the Virginia's version of Congress, where they would vote and debate and discuss issues that affected Virginia. But again, already you can see in these colonies, the idea of self-government takes root, no pun intended, very, very early on. The next one is Plymouth. This is, of course, the Thanksgiving story, the Pilgrims. So we should all know this. The Pilgrims were being persecuted for their religion in England, got fed up of being abused and picked on. So screw this. We're going to take our ball and go somewhere else. And so they get some money together, charter a ship called the Mayflower. And these are families, right? So these are women, children, and men. Very different from a lot of early colonists, but families moving across the Atlantic Ocean, even though it was dangerous, it was worth it to them to worship their religion freely and not being harassed. So they also set up shop in like the first place they land. They were aiming for Virginia. They missed by a little bit and end up in Massachusetts, and they land at Plymouth Rock. So what's important here is they were escaping again for religious freedom. And they also realized early on that they're on their own, and so they have to govern themselves. And so they create what's called the Mayflower Compact. Even before they got off the ship, right? They realized we got to get this settled first. So, they're tired. They've been on the ocean forever. They want to get on solid land. Before we do, let's get some ground rules here. And so the Mayflower Compact is like a social contract where all the Pilgrims agreed on following the same rules, helping each other out, and they're all going to kind of basically contribute and work towards the health of the colony. But again, it's ideas of self-government come very early because, again, you have no one else to depend on in these new territories, these new colonies you're trying to build. Also, the Pilgrims have a very Puritan lifestyle. What does that mean? Is they're very hardworking. They're not afraid to roll up their sleeves. And to them, laziness was a sin. And so they were always working hard. That was part of their religion, to be laborious and be productive. And so kind of that idea maybe of like the American dream, right? You work hard, you can make something of yourself. A lot of that kind of comes from the Pilgrims. And again, just having that kind of Puritan work ethic, which you need in the colonies. It's a lot of hard work to try and build something out of nothing. Next up north, we have New York and New Jersey. Originally, New York was called New Netherland. It was actually a Dutch colony, but it became pretty profitable. And England wanted it for themselves because it was a moneymaker. So England takes it over and names it New York. But this was originally given to wealthy families on what were called patroons, kind of like large land grants to the connected and the wealthy. So they could go over there and kind of live as like mini nobles is the idea. But the colony grows. It becomes a little bit too big to manage. And so they chip off a little piece, and that's where New Jersey comes from. So New Netherland becomes New York, which then becomes part of it, New Jersey. And that was called the proprietary colony, just a little kind of child colony off of the big one. Eventually, though, the northern colonies, the New England colonies, become very dependent on shipping. There's a lot of good harbors up there, so there was a lot of trading back and forth between the southern colonies, the New England, the Caribbean, and Europe. And so there's a lot of trade, and also fur trapping. Fur trade was very big. A lot of animals in North America, like beaver pelts and stuff, were very fashionable at the time. And so hunters would go and capture them, and you could sell the skin for a lot of money. So that was their kind of big industry. Their economy focused a lot on the fur trade and overseas shipping, and these guys were money makers. Pennsylvania is another important colony. A little different. This was started by a guy named William Penn. He was pretty friendly with the King of England. And Pennsylvania is kind of an experiment. He was given some land from the king to go set up a colony. And this idea was, in this colony in Pennsylvania, I mean, named after the guy, right? Named after him. It would be a colony where all religions would be accepted, right? Religious tolerance would become the norm. And so kind of like the Pilgrims, people came to Pennsylvania. Penn was a Quaker, so a lot of Quakers would follow suit, but others too, where again, religion could be practiced without persecution or harassment. Because they were so open and friendly with religion, it's no surprise then that Pennsylvania actually was one of the few colonies that had very good relations with the Native Americans as well. Remember, even though we call it the New World, and these colonists were coming, there were people here already. The Native American tribes have been here for a long time. They already have their towns established, and they're here. And these colonists are definitely intruding on them, which the Native Americans don't really appreciate very much. But because the people in Pennsylvania treated them very fairly, they actually had some good working relationships with them. But it makes sense because Pennsylvania was built on toleration and living with your fellow man, no matter the differences from the start. The last one in our super simplified look at colonies is the colony of Carolina. Yes, just Carolina. So this is one of the later ones, 1670, and it was just the colony of Carolina. However, because it was so large, again, like kind of with New York and New Jersey, it also gets split into two later on, just so it's easier to kind of govern and manage. Remember, these colonies, many of them are much bigger than England themselves, so this is no small task at the time. But what's important here is these southern colonies were very much built on agriculture, right? These are from, even from the beginning, farming was a way of life, and they are also there to make money, what we call cash crops. You may be thinking, oh, they grew a lot of cotton. Not quite. Cotton was popular during the time of the Civil War, but at this time, cotton's a money loser. Cotton is just very laborious. It takes a long time to grow and to clean. So cotton was grown, but not a lot. They grew a lot of food, basically, like soybeans and a little bit of tobacco, rice, stuff like that. But it was cash crops on large plantations, these large family-owned farms with a lot of workers working on them to grow the crops, because if you're wealthy, you don't want to be in the field. It's hard work. Instead, have other people do it for you. And of course, yes, they did have slaves at this time as well. Even Jamestown, we know from records that some of the first colonists in that initial group were slaves. So again, even from day one, slavery was a thing in North America from these colonies. But hopefully that helped. Hopefully a good overview. Again, there's 13 original colonies. We're not going over all of them, of course, but kind of gives you a good idea of some of the early ones and some of the southern and New England ones and how they kind of initially were set up, and again, how you can see how a lot of those ideas that become bedrocks of the United States. Things like hard work, religious freedom, self-government, and yes, sadly, slavery in the beginning are already here from day one and will grow and develop as we build our identity. And these colonies eventually end up becoming a nation, a country unto itself. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that was simple and helps give you a leg up as you study and go through your history classes to get a better understanding of what these colonies were and what they were about. All right, with that said, Mr. Duker, Super Simplified Social Studies, and I will catch you later. Bye.